Shalom. Kol halal Yahweh B'Hashem Abishai B'Hashem Rakakwadash. Double honors unto the apostles, double honors unto the elder bishops, salutations to all my fellow laborers doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so, now more so than ever. To the scattered elect that are scattered around the four corners of the earth, that be like unto the speckled bird, the Israelite foreigners, among the heathens that look like the heathens, and to the Akwath that are listening and learning, to you I say Shalom. This is your brother Malcolm from the branch of the Great Millstone here in Chicago, coming at you with another lesson in truth. And I'm gonna go back into this book. I've touched on this book. This was a book that was gifted to me by some men of the Lord. This is the third edition. I'm reading from the fourth edition from the same John D. Davis. It would be nice to have the first. You always there's nothing like the first edition, because every time a book is revised, more information is removed. And this is from 1934 mine's a little bit more fragile. Westminster Press in Philadelphia, 1934. This one is from, the one on the screen is from 1929. And you can see the price of the book is $140, down from $164. So, and I will spend that type of money on a book, to defend this gospel. But they know that the average Jake is not going to do that. Average Jake's going to buy a pair of Jordans or some weed, with that kind of money. But we're going to go into, I'm on page 464, and I'm just going to do a lesson. It'll probably be a two-part series. So I'm going to do, I got some scriptures marked off in the book of Maccabees. It's talking about the Maccabean history, about the mighty man Matthias and his sons, the Maccabees. They were mighty men of the Lord, judges that the Lord rose up at the time. And this is the history of the Maccabees is so important, because this is the history of what happens between the Old Testament and the New Testament, which is where the Apocrypha set in the Bible. It's set right in between the Old Testament and the New Testament. It was the buffer. And it clears up the history of how the Israelites became strangers, and many of the Israelites became or called Greeks, and many of the other heathen nations too. All right, but they were Hellenized, and the Hellenization of outsiders, including the Israelites, that history is important, very important, because there's a 400-year period between the time of the Old Testament and the coming of the Lord, and that's marked off. As a matter of fact, let's see if I can find that real quick. We'll start with that. That's in I think that's in Second Ezra. So hold on, let me mark my page. Don't want to lose my page. Let's see if I can find that real quick. I believe that's Second Ezra in the fourth chapter, the fifth chapter. Yeah, Second Ezra 7. All right. Second Ezra 7 and 28, and it reads, "For my son Yahushua shall be revealed with those that be with him, and they that remain shall rejoice within 400 years." All right. Then it says, "And after these years shall my son Hamashiach die, and all men that have life." All right, so and then you can reference Romans 9 1 through 4. All right, when it's talking about all men, it's talking. The book is written to the Israelites, so that's when it's talking about all men. And Christians, try to make the book that is singular to one group of people. They try to make it universal. So when it says all men, all people, he's talking to his people, his own people. All right. He's not talking to the outsiders. The law, statutes, and commandments of the Bible never applied to the outside nations. All right. So let's get into the lesson, the first portion of it. So let's start reading. We're on page 464 in this dictionary Bible. You see this rare sell of books. I've got a couple books off it before. All right. But it says Maccabee, a family also called Asmonean from one of its ancestors, which ruled Judea from 166 BC to 37 BC. See Asmonean. So I'm going to have to read that too. It says the title Maccabees was first given to Judas, third son of Matthias, first Maccabees. All right. But at an early date, it was transferred to the entire family and to the others who had been a part of the same event. So it went from being a title that was given to Judas Maccabee to they started putting it upon the whole family, and then it became upon all the men, the warriors, the men of the Lord that fought with them in this campaign against the heathen round about. Okay, so that's how that title, the Maccabees. All right, and it says, but at an early date it was transferred to the entire family and others who had part in the same events. The origin and meaning of the term have eluded research. It usually derived from a maccabee, all right, a hammer, either in allusion to the crushing blows inflicted by Judas and his successors upon their enemies, or perhaps because of a cap worn by Judas was shaped like a hammer at the top of his point, which I seriously doubt that, because the Israelites didn't wear hats. They were, that wasn't a part of their custom. But then again, there was 400 years of Greek influence, Hellenization, and they did bring in that whole wearing of the cap. All right. When the conversion, we'll get to that part. When the Edomites were converted by John Hyrcanus, and we will get to that. They brought in that custom of wearing a cap, and the Israelites are known for keeping that crown. They wore head wraps, but they kept the head wrap, the top of their head, the crown was always left open. They didn't cover up their head, the crown of their head. That's another telltale sign that these converts don't really follow the Bible. They follow Judaism. All right, and Judaism has nothing to do. They love using that word Jewish this and Jewish that. No, Jewish came about at the time of the conversion of John Hyrcanus. But let us continue. It says, it also has been explained as composed of the initials of the Hebrew words in a sentence. Who is like among the gods? Who is like among the gods? And then they got Jehovah. We know it's Yahweh. There's no letter J that was newly created. All right. Or in a sentence, what is like my father? Or the Hebrew word. And these words are small, so forgive me. The writing is very small. It says MACCABEES, which I'm trying to read it, and it says extinguisher. None of these interpretations is, however, more than a conjecture. The first of the family mentioned is Matthias, an aged priest who, driven by desperation by the outrages and of the desperation by the outrages of the Antiochus Epiphanes, raised a revolt against him and fled to the mountains, followed by those who were zealous for the faith of Israel, which was the Bible. It had nothing to do with being Jewish. Remember, it's a two-part word. And Jew is really a derogatory term, but it's referring to the word Judah. And then Ish means to be like or pertaining to. All right. So it said for the faith of Israel. And the faith of Israel is the belief in the Bible itself in its entirety. The law, statute, commandments being a living law, a living word of the Lord. All right? Because remember, the word became flesh. And it says, matter of fact, let's go to the Apocrypha real quick. Let's go first, Maccabees. Said the because Matthias raised up and put the sword to these wicked men, and his sons followed him, and people who were zealous for the law. As a matter of fact, that can be found in and this is some grievous atrocities that were being done to the Israelites. All right. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and read some. It says, now the 15th day of the month. This is First Maccabees 54. All right. And it says, now the 15th day of the month of Caslu, in the 145th 50 year, they set up abominations of desolation upon the altar and builded altars throughout the cities of Judea on every side, and burnt incense at the doors of the houses and in the streets. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law which they found, they burnt them with fire. And whatsoever was found with any, and whosoever was found with any of the book of the testament, or if any of the consented to the law, the king's commandment was that they should be put to death. Thus did they, by their authority unto the Israelites, every month, as many as were found in the cities. All right, I'm gonna jump down to 61, and it says 60. It says, at which time, according to the commandment, they put to death certain women that had caused their children to be circumcised, as they hanged the infants about their necks and rifled their houses and slew them that circumcised them. So have you ever heard of such a sick and heinous act? And this was done by so-called white people, and you had Israelites that were consenting unto it. So we've always had sellouts amongst us. Always. You always had sellout and turncoats, and those are the 2/3. Right? The Moors were a big part of that. A lot of the Moors were slave owners and slave handlers. A lot of people don't want to, listen to that history, but it's true. You got these people so much bragging about, being a Moor and Moor science. But the Moors were some of the biggest race traders the world has ever seen, man, to their own people. All right. They were selling the natives. They were, and even Gad. But the flip side of that coin is that Esau was always behind it. He was the orchestrator of all that. Jumping down to verse 2, it says, and in those days arose Matthias, son of John, the son of John, the son of Simon, a priest of John of Jorab from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modem. All right. And he had 5 sons, Jonan called Cadiz, Simon called Thassi, Judas called Maccabees, Eleazar called Avarin, and Jonathan, whose surname was Aphas. All right. So, and Matthias rose up and slew some wickedness that, some priests and some heathens that were doing some wickedness. All right. And they fled into the wilderness afterwards. Okay. And one part that I had just read, he said the outrages that were done by Epiphanes, and it says back into the book now, page 465. It says by the first of the family mentioned was Matthias, an aged priest who, driven by desperation by the outrages of Antiochus Epiphanes, raised a revolt against him and fled into the mountains followed by those who were zealous for the faith of the Israel. Matthias died about 2 years afterwards, but the revolt was carried on by his 5 sons. Judas, the third son, was the first military leader in 166 by avoiding pitched battles and harassing the Syrians by vigorous and persistent guerrilla warfare. He and his devoted band defeated and routed every detachment of the Syrian army sent against him. He retook Jerusalem, purified the temple, and restored the daily sacrifice. That was an important thing. All right, so let's go. And when they got to that temple, what did they find? They found this. Let's go to 1 Maccabees 3:48. And it reads, I'm going to start at 46. Wherefore the Israelites assembled themselves together and came to Mesphah over against Jerusalem, for Mesphah was a place where they prayed aforetime in Israel. Then they fasted the day and put on sackcloth and cast ashes upon their heads and rent their clothes, and laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. So this iconoclasm, this taking of our heritage, these blasphemies, these pale images, these images of strangers being us, it started way back then. And it continued big time, especially when and during the time of the Renaissance, when Esau came back into power. All right, because Esau failed. Rome fell, and white people, so-called white people, were no longer the ruling class people for 1,000 years. And so when they came back into power in the 1300s, because all these movies you see about the medieval times, and they always showing you white people were serfs and servants, and on the bottom, and a lot of them were still up in the caves at that time. All right, during the time of the Dark Ages in the medieval time. All right, but that's their racial, their hatred and their shame about their true history, which prevents them from telling the truth about history. But that was what was going on. All right. So now we're going to let's continue. Let's go back into the book. And it says, he retook Jerusalem, purified the temple, and restored the daily sacrifice. A feast to celebrate this restoration was instituted and was annually thereafter. This was the winter feast of dedication, alluded to John 10:22. All right. And so let's read that. Let's go that, because the feast of matter of fact, let's go to John 10:22, because the Lord talks about it. This is how you know that the Lord acknowledged, that this was a legitimate, the Maccabees was a part of the Bible, because it's the Lord that talks about it, and a place where this history is written, where these events took place, was during that time. But let's go to John. It was during the time of the Maccabees. But let's go to John 10:22. And it reads, let's start at 21. And it says, others said that they are not the words of him that have a devil. Can a devil open the eyes of the blind? And it was at Jerusalem's the feast of dedication, and it was winter. And Yahushua walked in the temple of Solomon's porch. Okay, so this event that took place at this time in the book of John, where Yahushua was at the temple, in Solomon's temple, it was during the time of the feast of dedication. All right, which is found where? In the Apocrypha. Okay, and as a matter of fact, let's go to it. It's found in the fourth book, First Maccabees, the 4th chapter, and I'm gonna read like verses 53 through 61. All right. So let's start there. This is First Maccabees, the 4th chapter, and I'm gonna start at verse 53, and it reads, and offer sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of the burnt offerings which they had made, looked at what time and what day, and the heathen had profaned it, even in that was dedicated with songs and cisterns and harps and cymbals. You know, Israel loved their music, man, and they praised the Lord in music. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising God, of the God of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and a sacrifice of deliverance and praise, because because the feast of dedication, these are one of the high holy days, but nobody's gonna be keeping it, you know. And then and the imposter, the fake Jewish people, they run around with Hanukkah, but they're not really keeping it like this. And where they're getting that from? All right. Like I said, in the Maccabean, the scriptures in the Maccabees reveals a lot of things that Christians do not want to talk about. Neither do Jewish people want to talk about, because in the talking about these things, it reveals their false and fake history, and that they're counterfeits. All right. But it says they decked the forefront of the temple and with crowns of gold, and with shields, and the gates and the chambers renewed, and hanged doors upon them. Thus, with their very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained the days of dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year, in the space of 8 days, from the 5th and 20th day of the month of Seslu, with mirth and gladness. All right. And that's what's mentioned in John 10 and 22. All right. At that time, also they built it, and the Lord was in Jerusalem in Solomon's temple for it. Okay. It says, and at that time also they builded up the Mount Zion with the high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down as they had done before. And they set their garrison to keep it, and fortify their shore to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea, against these so-called white people, right? These same people who call themselves Jewish today. All right, because we're getting close to the time, when the Maccabee starts losing members, and when eventually John Hyrcanus does a forced conversion of a particular group of Edomites, not all the Edomites, but a portion of Edom was converted to to follow the law, statutes, and commandments, and that is the beginning and the birth of this Jewish issue that we're faced with. So we're going to stop right there, and I'm going to continue. It'll probably be another part, maybe even two. Still a lot of information to cover. So with that, I'm going to give all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash, Wa Ababa Ba, and Kwam Yasharala Shalom.